Help us stop it before it starts.
CBS Late Night will begin 1/2 hour from now, following this CBS News special report.
I made a very deliberate decision not to ask the president so that I could insulate him from the decision and provide some future deniability for the president if it ever leaked out. Of course, our hope was that it would not leak out.
This is a CBS News special report. The Iran-Contra hearings, the Admiral's secret. From Capitol Hill, here is Dan Rather.
Good evening. For 8 long months, White House officials from President Reagan on down were holding their breath, wondering, worrying. Would Admiral John Poindexter, National Security Advisor until the Iran-Contra scandal exploded, point a finger at President Reagan? Would the Admiral say the President knew all about using money from the secret sale of weapons to Iran to fund the Nicaraguan Contras, possibly in violation of the law? Today, some of the suspense finally was popped. Poindexter went before the Iran-Contra investigating committees here on Capitol Hill. You could almost literally hear the sighs of relief from the White House as the Admiral took the seat and the heat. Poindexter said he alone approved the diversion of cash. He never specifically told President Reagan about it. But Bob Schieffer reports that on another key question, the Admiral delivered a dangerous disclosure about Mr. Reagan.
John Poindexter's long-awaited trip to Capitol Hill started out as a very bad day for his old boss, Ronald Reagan. Poindexter said flatly that in 1985, the president had signed a document, a so-called finding, that authorized a secret plan to swap U.S. arms for American hostages.
Am I correct that the finding itself was essentially a straight arms for hostage finding?
That is correct.
Did the President of the United States sign that finding?
As I've testified before, he did, on or about the 5th of December. I'm vague on the date.
Almost a year later, the president was still denying he had even considered such a thing.
In spite of the wildly speculative and false stories about arms for hostages and alleged ransom payments, we did not, repeat, did not trade weapons or anything else for hostages, nor will we.
But later that month, as the situation reached the boiling point, an assistant brought Poindexter the Iran files, including the document Poindexter says the president signed, the document clearing the way for an arms for hostage swap. Poindexter said the aide recognized the document could be explosive.
I thought it was politically embarrassing, and so I decided to tear it up. And I tore it up, put it in the burn basket behind my desk.
After that, the news for Ronald Reagan got better. Poindexter painted the picture of a president so determined to find a way to get the American hostages back, he was willing to press on with the overtures to Iran, even though his secretaries of state and defense were dubious.
He sat back and he said something to the effect, and this is not a direct quote, but it was something to the effect that I don't feel that we can leave any stone unturned in trying to get the hostages back.
And then came the news that brought a huge sigh of relief from White House aides. Poindexter said the scheme to funnel profits from the secret arms sales to Iran to the Nicaraguan rebels had come from him and from Oliver North, that the president didn't know about it, and Poindexter said he never told him.
Although I was convinced that we could properly do it, and that the president would approve if asked, I made a very deliberate decision not to ask the president so that I could insulate him from the decision and provide some future deniability for the president if it ever leaked out.
For a period of whatever it is, 9 months, you kept it from the President of the United States.
You know, the buck stops here with me. I made the decision. I felt that I had the authority to do it. I thought it was a good idea. I was convinced that the president would, in the end, think it was a good idea. But I did not want him to be associated with the decision.
Did you not think, sir, that given the potential for damage and embarrassment, that he, the President of the United States, should have the choice whether to proceed with this use of the money?
I can't say that at the time the thought crossed my mind that you have described, but with hindsight, I still contend that I believe that the president would have approved the decision at the time if I had asked him.
The way Poindexter told it today, he thought that he and Oliver North were the only people in the government who knew the Contras were being financed by profits from the secret Iran arms sales. He said he considered the plan so sensitive that even the director of the CIA should not be told about it.
Mr. Casey had to come up to the Hill to testify before the intelligence committees, and I did not want him to have to be evasive in answering questions on this particular area of how we were supporting the Contras.
All in all, it was a day of amazing testimony. Poindexter arguing throughout that he and other members of the National Security Council staff did not believe the Boland Amendment applied to them. The Boland Amendment, of course, the law that Congress passed to cut off aid to the Contras. And one other thing came through today, Dan. Many people thought that John Poindexter might take the line that he didn't really know what Oliver North was up to. But over and over again today, he seemed to say he did know what Oliver North was doing, and he was ready to say he did and admit it.
Good point. Thank you, Bob. Joining us now in our CBS News anchor booth here on Capitol Hill, retired Air Force General Brent Scowcroft, President Ford's National Security Affairs Advisor and a member of the Tower Commission that originally looked into this whole affair. General, thank you again for being with us tonight. You've heard Oliver North and Admiral John Poindexter. Any big questions left?
Well, I think one of the big questions is this decision that Admiral Poindexter made not to tell the president. It seems to me that's a fairly big decision. Now, not everything that comes across the National Security Advisor desk for a decision can go to the president. He literally wouldn't have time to do anything. So it's a matter of judgment. But it is at least curious that Admiral Poindexter didn't seek legal counsel as to whether or not this was an issue of great moment or something that he could make himself, a decision he could make himself.
Admiral Poindexter said he considered all of this to be simply operational detail. Do you?
No, not this decision.
Why?
Because it was a very major decision. And I think, you know, in retrospect now, it was a disastrous decision to have made.
Any doubt in your mind if the president did not know, should he have known?
No, I think he did not know. I think he should have known, clearly.
In the first Reagan term, the so-called broad management style seemed to work out very well. Here in the second term, clearly, at least in this instance, it has not, to say the least. Why do you think that is?
Well, I can only speculate, but I would say one of the major differences is that Don Regan believed in letting Reagan be Reagan. And I think he knew that the president felt very strongly about the hostages and very strongly about the Contras, and therefore he supported policies which aided both.
Whereas his predecessor, as White House Chief of Staff Jim Baker, had a somewhat different view.
Much more careful, and saw one of his prime jobs to defend the president against some of his own instincts, if necessary.
And Baker was a great believer in national consensus, or certainly reaching some consensus with Congress.
Absolutely. He was very aware of the role of Congress and the necessity for trying to bring Congress along.
General Scowcroft, thank you very much for being with us.
You bet.
President Reagan had been saying it for months, and to be fair, one must underscore it. The president said he wanted nothing more than for the full story of the missiles for Iran, money to the Contras affair to be told. So when John Poindexter started telling at least some of it today, what he said was the full story, no one watched and listened with more interest than the President and Mrs. Reagan. Bill Plant has been at the White House all day gathering reaction. Bill?
And for the White House, there was only one central issue in all of this, and that was, would Admiral John Poindexter contradict President Reagan's insistence that he was never told about the diversion of profits from the Iran arms sales to the Contras. And the president's reaction today, after he had heard that Poindexter supported his version, "What's new about that?" said Mr. Reagan. "I've been saying that for 7 months." But if you're the president, not knowing has both an upside and a downside.
I think it is dangerous to have one single individual in the executive branch acting without even the president knowing about the nature of controversial decisions.
And the White House staff would just as soon forget the other major news from Poindexter's testimony, that President Reagan signed a document at the outset of the Iran initiative which authorized a straight arms for hostages swap. Mr. Reagan has denied all along that it was that kind of deal. And even after the Tower Commission report confirmed that it was, the president insisted it hadn't started out that way.
A few months ago, I told the American people I did not trade arms for hostages. My heart and my best intentions still tell me that's true, but the facts and the evidence tell me it is not.
So even though members of the White House staff say that they feel as though a great burden has been lifted in terms of presidential involvement, they do admit that Mr. Reagan still has credibility problems as a result of this deal. Dan?
Bill, credibility problems, they mean credibility problems in this country. What about his credibility problems abroad with our allies?
They hope that the worst of this is over and that the president will be able to concentrate particularly internationally on the one thing that they feel can gain him back a lot of stature, and that would be, of course, an arms control deal with the Soviets.
Thank you,
and it
Bill.
appears that the Soviets are waiting as well.
I would think that the Soviets would find this good news in their interest, that the president now certainly wants to make a deal in order to get his credibility up.
It appears that way, and it looks that his chances may improve after today's testimony.
Thanks, Bill. When we come back, we'll take a closer look at Admiral Poindexter's view of the executive branch, and later on, we'll see how the Iran-Contra show is playing in the rest of the country.
I don't hide my real feelings, do you? I express them, show what I'm really made of. Even the way I wear my hair shows how I feel, either up or long and natural. But I always wanted healthy looking, so I use Clairol Condition. Condition products are good for my hair. Protein-enriched shampoos and treatments, alcohol-free styling mousses, even hairsprays that won't dull or dry out my hair. Good, healthy-looking hair says a lot about someone. Condition hair care. Come on, show them what you're really made of.
Dan Miller waited a long time to see this. He almost missed it. Not long ago, Dan had a heart attack. Since then, his doctor prescribed a regimen of exercise, the right foods, and an aspirin a day. Studies with people who had a heart attack or unstable angina show aspirin can help prevent heart attacks.
He was always there when I needed him.
Maybe it could help you. See your doctor. He knows what's right for you. This message brought to you by Bayer, the wonder drug that works wonders.
I'm an apple lover. Sunny apple lover.
Riunite Sunny Apple, the taste of fresh apples and natural Riunite, not a watered-down cooler. Try peach and raspberry, too.
Attention, car buyers. Don't buy anything until you see this. Now, buy any Mazda 626 in stock and choose $900 in options free from Mazda or get $900 cash back. Buy one of these 323s in stock and choose $500 in options free from Mazda or get $500 cash back. Use cash back toward your down payment or get a check from Mazda. Hurry, get $900 on 626 or $500 on 323 today.
Where does it hurt? Here. For indigestion, heartburn, and gas, nobody does as much as Maalox Plus. Dose for dose, it neutralizes more than any regular strength antacid and dissolves gas. Nobody does as much as Maalox Plus.
Admiral Poindexter said today he approved the diversion of Iran arms money to the Contras and did not specifically tell President Reagan about it because he wanted to protect Mr. Reagan from political embarrassment in case it ever became public. Under questioning, the Admiral defended his decision to take the responsibility to himself.
I had the authority to approve it because I had a commission from the president, which was in very broad terms. My role was to make sure that his policies were implemented. In this case, the policy was very clear, and that was to support the Contras. I was convinced that I understood the president's thinking on this, and that if I had taken it to him, that he would have approved it. You know, frankly, as Colonel North has testified, I thought it was a neat idea too. And I'm sure the president would have enjoyed knowing about it.
Earlier tonight, we talked with two members of the Iran-Contra committees, Democratic Senator Paul Sarbanes of Maryland and Republican Senator William Cohen of Maine. We talked about what they thought was wrong with Admiral Poindexter's view of the law and accountability.
If Poindexter can make these decisions without them going up to the president, then you're set up for a cabal or a junta really to work within the government of the United States. You can have a secret clique, and they set up this private network, the enterprise, Secord's enterprise, that can carry on covert activities all over the world, and according to Poindexter, without the president knowing.
Well, Senator Cohen, what's wrong with that? Shouldn't the president have that kind of capability, that capacity?
Well, I think what's wrong with it was the description that this was a mere technicality in carrying out the president's overall program. And I would have to say it's much more than a mere technicality. As a matter of fact, the president did approve the sale of weapons to Iran, and that was a major covert initiative. But the fact, if you consider that they used the funds by inflating the price and using the residuals to fund a program that had been specifically rejected by Congress, then it amounts to something more than a simple technicality in implementing the president's program. It's a far more serious situation. And I would agree that something of that magnitude warrants the attention of the President of the United States.
According to Poindexter, no elected official chosen by the people knew about this operation. He said the president didn't know. That's his assertion. The Congress didn't know, the elected representatives, because they concealed it from the Congress. So in effect, Poindexter and this cabal are in a position to run anywhere they want to go. That's a dangerous thing in a democratic society.
Well, Senator Cohen, do you agree with that? He used the word earlier, a kind of junta. Now, we know there are countries run by colonels and admirals, but isn't that a bit strong?
I think it's a bit of an overstatement with respect to the junta. But what it does reflect, I think you used the word according to John Poindexter, is that we're looking through a lens that has a very narrow focus. And there is such a pervasive sense of distrust. And so what happens is the circle of secrecy tends to get very narrow, so that only a very few individuals are keyed into what is going on. And I do think that does tend to operate well beyond the bounds of anything that a democratic government would want. But I don't think these people, what comes through to me is these individuals are not malevolent-minded, they're not criminally minded. They're people who see the world in a very different way than what we've been accustomed to dealing with. I think that's what's coming out of this message today.
Senator Sarbanes, where does it go from here? The White House is pushing pretty hard on the idea this deflates the rest of the hearings. There's really maybe a little mop-up work, but not much else.
Well, of course, I think the hearings are directed at the broader question of how was policy made and who was making it. The White House takes the view that if the president didn't know, there's no problem. And that's essentially because the president has made this assertion that he didn't know. If it now shows up that he knew, then clearly he was lying to the American people. What kind of government is it that we have when the President of the United States is kept in the dark, according to Poindexter, about very important matters, which I think most people looking at it would say, well, the President ought to know about that. They ought not to be doing things like that without presidential judgment, let alone notification to the Congress.
Thank you very much, Senator Sarbanes. Senator Cohen. In just a moment, we'll be taking a look at how the Iran-Contra show is playing out of town. So stay with us.
Hey, you're eating bran cereal because it's good for you, right? Guess what's in it besides bran? Sugar. Up to 22 added teaspoons a box. Over time, that can really add up. And up. But Nabisco shredded wheat and bran is different. It hasn't got 1 grain of added sugar or salt. Nabisco shredded wheat and bran, now in the big 18-ounce box, too. If you're eating bran because it's good for you, why add sugar and salt?
Nabisco.
Taster's Choice, the image of gourmet store coffee. Only Taster's Choice uses a superior blend of the very same coffee beans found in gourmet stores, Arabica beans, the world's costliest and most flavorful. Gourmet store coffee and Taster's Choice, a remarkable resemblance. Enjoy the richness, aroma, and flavor. Regular or naturally decaffeinated, the choice for taste is Taster's Choice.
People can't get enough of the rumors about who's sleeping with whom. Now they're latching onto rumors about AIDS and sex. The reality is, AIDS is sexually transmitted. So you have to be aware and selective, because you're sleeping with every person your partner's been with for the last 10 years. So know what you're doing and find out the facts.
Rumors are spreading faster than AIDS. For more information, write the American Red Cross.
Bye, bye, Miss American Pie. Drove my Chevy to the levee, but the levee was dry. Them good old boys were drinking whiskey and rye and singing, this will be the day that I die. This will be the day that I die.
If you drink and drive, this could be the day that you die.
For over a week now, it has been the hot topic, the Iran-Contra hearings, Oliver North's performance, John Poindexter's revelations. To try to help measure the impact around the country, we thought we'd talk to three newspaper editors. Bill Kovich of the Atlanta Journal and Constitution, James Gannon of the Des Moines Register, and Gerald Warren of the San Diego Union. Gentlemen, good evening. Thank you for being with us. Last week, you might argue that Oliver North took the country by storm. This week, maybe a different story. The committee speaking up. Bud McFarland back to contradict some of North's testimony. And now today, Admiral Poindexter's bombshells. Has any of that tarnished the Colonel North's luster any at all? Bill Kovich in Atlanta?
Dan, I think the reaction here has been fairly typical. At the beginning of last week, most people were irritated that television had interrupted their local broadcast to carry the hearings. But as word spread about the dramatic testimony, Colonel North and the Temple of Doom, the audience was literally hooked, an extraordinary audience. And they picked up until this week. I think they were reserving judgment, and as Bud McFarland contradicted his friend, and now Admiral Poindexter contradicted him, I think there's some questions being raised.
Jim Gannon in Des Moines, what about in your area?
Well, Dan, we've seen an interesting two-phased reaction here, as measured at least by the mail we're getting from our readers. After the first few days of Oliver North's testimony, Ali Mania was sweeping the country, and we were getting a strong pro-North mail. It seemed to change after a few days of that. There was a strong reaction in the other direction, and now we're getting more mail raising serious questions about Oliver North and criticizing him. And overall, right now, our total mail is about 2-to-1 against Oliver North and his testimony.
Jerry Warren, in addition to being a distinguished newspaper editor, you're a one-time White House spokesman with a special perspective on this. Southern California, generally considered a strong, conservative, Reagan-supporting area. How's it gone in your section of the country?
Well, it was a big story from the start. It didn't take any time at all to catch on out here, Dan. The people were watching this story from the very start Monday morning. And today, when Oliver North was not on and Admiral Poindexter was, the people turned off their sets. It's just unbelievable that they are more hooked on Ollie North than they are on what the Admiral said today.
Jerry, Senator McClure mentioned today that he didn't think the housewives around the country understood much about this and indicated he didn't think they were all that interested. Would you agree with that?
No, I hardly disagree with it. People of all walks of life, housewives, maybe our area is different. We do have a strong military orientation here, Dan, and the main view of the military over the last 10 years is that the press and the Congress have hampered their fight for freedom.
Jim Gannon, in your section of the country, there are an extraordinarily high number of women who work outside the home, including farm wives and women who do all sorts of work. Is it true that they haven't been paying attention? They don't really understand what's at issue here?
No, I think there's a clear understanding that this is a world-class story and very important, and people are talking about it and reading about it and writing to us about it.
Bill Kovich, how does all this bear on the political health of Ronald Reagan and what we might call the authority with which he'll be able to govern during the rest of his term?
Well, I think it raises some serious questions. I think the interest in these hearings goes far beyond just exactly how much the president knew and raises questions about how much he didn't know. In terms of what sort of attention's being paid, we have I think, a perfect quote from a young student in a high school here who says that that from the beginning the question has been who's telling lies, and that's the reason for these hearings, and she and her friends are watching it to find out who's lying.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. Appreciate you being with us. You know, much has been said this week about the differences between the two star witnesses at the Iran-Contra hearings. The flashy performance of Oliver North in his Marine uniform, bedecked in medals that he earned. The calm, measured delivery of John Poindexter, who chose not to wear his admiral's uniform nor the medals that he had earned. Differences aside, there was a disturbing similarity in the stories they told. Disturbing, at least in this sense, both talked of working under what they perceived, they said, as a broad mandate from the President of the United States to carry out his policies. A mandate so broad, as they said they perceived it, that it took them into slippery, perhaps even criminal territory. Territory unprotected by the checks and balances of our Constitution. Earlier this week, Senator Daniel Inouye of Hawaii said that the most depressing thing that he'd heard at the hearings was that, and these are his words, if the cause is right, you may do anything. Cheat, lie, manipulate, mislead, end of quotation. The cause in this case, representative government, democracy. But the question that keeps coming up at these hearings is, if promoting that noble cause abroad justifies putting democracy, government by the people, under a cloud at home. Admiral Poindexter continues his testimony tomorrow, and we'll have a complete wrap-up on the CBS Evening News. Until then, Dan Rather on Capitol Hill with the thought, long may our land be bright with freedom's holy light. Good night.
How come your coffee is darker than mine?
Mine's decaffeinated Folgers Crystals. Yours is the decaffeinated brand you've been drinking for years.
Mine's lighter looking.
See these dark, sparkling crystals made from Folgers mountain-grown coffee.
It smells really rich.
Alice, looks and aroma are one thing, but how does it taste?
Have a sip.
Mountain grown. Alice, you're right, as usual.
Now I know why I married you. You're so sensible.
Decaffeinated Folgers Crystals. So dark.